Smile for the camera, old lady. The man holding the phone laughed as rain hammered the ranch fence hard enough to sound like gravel against sheet metal. Red and blue livestream hearts floated across his cracked screen, while another man kicked open the wooden gate with muddy boots. The camera shook as they walked deeper onto the property, pickup headlights slicing through the darkness in long pale beams. Somewhere beyond the barn, horses stirred nervously. One snorted into the cold Texas wind. Told you this place was creepy, somebody muttered. Man, relax, another voice said. It's just some black widow hiding out with cows. Laughter rolled across the yard. Naomi Carter sat in the rocking chair on her front porch without moving. The porch light above her buzzed softly, throwing pale gold across the weathered wood beneath her boots. She wore a faded denim jacket over a gray thermal shirt, her dark curls tied back beneath a black ball cap. Rainwater dripped steadily from the roof beside her. She looked less like a threat and more like a tired ranch owner who had seen too many hard winters. The youngest man in the group pointed the phone toward her face. There she is, he grinned. Queen of Black Ridge Ranch. Comments flooded the live stream. Somebody typed, she looks like she bakes cookies. Another, take her land. More laughing. Naomi's eyes moved slowly from one face to another. Calm. Measured. Like she was counting them instead of fearing them. 5 men. 2 trucks. 1 shotgun hanging loose against a shoulder. 1 crowbar. 1 nervous kid pretending not to shake. Her rocking chair creaked once beneath her. You boys done? She asked quietly. Her voice barely rose above the rain. Wade Mercer stepped out from behind the second truck, tall and broad beneath a soaked canvas jacket. His beard glistened with rainwater. The silver chain around his neck caught the headlights each time he moved. Even in the dark, he carried himself like the kind of man small towns learned not to challenge. Not even close, he said. County records say this land's getting reclaimed. Naomi glanced toward the fence line, where lightning briefly illuminated the field stretching. Behind the ranch house, nearly 40 acres of soaked grassland rolled into darkness. County records don't usually arrive after midnight, she replied. A few of the men chuckled under their breath. Wade's smile faded slightly. Funny thing about records, he said, stepping closer. People sign papers when they're scared enough. Naomi finally stood. Slow. Stiff. Like her knees hurt in cold weather. The live stream camera tilted upward with her movement. Comments slowed. Even through the rain and the dim porch light, something about the way she rose made the air feel tighter. Not bigger. Not louder. Just still. Wade noticed it too. His hand paused near his belt for half a second before he forced another grin. What? He mocked. You gonna stop us? Naomi looked past him toward the barn, where one of the horses kicked nervously against the wooden stall. Then she looked at the young kid filming. He couldn't have been older than 19. Rainwater ran down his cheeks while his phone trembled slightly in his hand. Naomi's eyes settled there for a moment. On the shaking. On the uncertainty. Then she looked back at Wade. You brought children onto my property, she said softly. That was your first mistake. The wind moved hard across the ranch, rattling the old American flag hanging beside the porch. Somewhere far out in the darkness, metal clanged once against metal. Sharp. Hollow. Every man turned toward the sound instinctively. Naomi didn't. Her face stayed calm beneath the porch light, while rain dripped from the brim of her cap. Wade laughed again, but this time it came slower. Less certain. You trying to scare me? Naomi slipped one hand into the pocket of her jacket. No, she said. I'm trying to warn you. The live stream chat exploded with laughing emojis again, but none of the men on the porch laughed with it. Because somewhere beyond the barn, hidden inside the darkness of Black Ridge Ranch, another sound echoed softly through the rain. The click of a gate closing by itself. The men stared toward the darkness beyond the barn while rain rolled across the ranch roof in steady waves. Nobody moved for several long seconds. The live stream comments slowed, then, filled with question marks and laughing emojis from people who thought the silence was part of the show. Wade Mercer finally spat into the mud near the porch steps and forced a grin back onto his face. Probably just loose cattle, he muttered, though his voice no longer carried the same swagger. Naomi Carter remained standing beneath the weak porch light, with one hand still inside her jacket pocket. Calm, unshaken, like the storm belonged to her more than the land did. The youngest man lowered his phone slightly. Wade, he whispered, maybe somebody else is out here. Wade shot him a glare. You scared of old fences now? The kid swallowed hard and lifted the phone again, but his camera drifted away from Naomi and toward the barn. The wooden structure sat nearly 60 yards from the house, black against the rain, its rusted roof glowing faint silver whenever lightning flashed behind the clouds. Another clang echoed through the darkness. Closer this time. One of the horses whinnied sharply. Naomi tilted her head just enough to listen. Your animals sound nervous, Wade said, trying to reclaim control of the moment. Animals know things before people do, Naomi answered. Her voice stayed low and steady, but something about it made the men shift uncomfortably. Wade climbed the porch steps slowly until he stood only a few feet away from her. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his beard onto the old wood between them. Let me make this simple, he said. You sign the land over, and we leave peaceful. Naomi looked at him for a long moment without blinking. Peaceful men do not arrive after midnight with cameras and gasoline. The air tightened again. Wade's jaw flexed. Behind him, one of the gang members walked toward the barn carrying a flashlight. The beam bounced wildly through the rain as he muttered curses under his breath. Trevor, Wade barked. Quit wandering. But Trevor kept walking. The livestream phone followed him now, viewers flooding the chat with comments as the flashlight beam swept across old tractors, fence posts, and stacked hay bales darkened by moisture. Nothing out here, Trevor called back, though his voice sounded thinner than before. Then, the flashlight suddenly cut sideways toward the ground. What the hell, he muttered. Guys. Wade turned halfway toward him. What? Trevor crouched near the mud beside the barn doors. There are footprints. Lightning flashed again. Deep boot prints stretched through the wet dirt behind him. Not fresh. Older. Precise. Like someone had been circling the property for hours without being seen. The livestream comments exploded again. Is someone hunting them? This is fake. Get out of there. Trevor's breathing became audible through the phone microphone. Wade, these are military boots. Wade scoffed loudly, but nobody joined his laughter this time. Naomi finally removed her hand from her jacket pocket. Slowly, deliberately. The men stiffened immediately, even though she held nothing except an old silver lighter worn smooth around the edges. She flicked it open once. Click. Tiny flame. Warm orange against the rain. Then shut it again. Click. You boys smell that? She asked quietly. The wind shifted across the ranch. Diesel fuel. Fresh. Stronger than before. Several heads turned toward the trucks parked near the gate. The youngest man lowered the phone completely now. Wade, he said under his breath, I do not think this is a good idea anymore. Wade stared at Naomi while rain soaked through his jacket collar. For the first time since arriving, uncertainty crept into his expression. Not fear yet. Just doubt. Small. Dangerous. Naomi slipped the lighter back into her pocket. Last chance, she said softly. Somewhere out in the darkness beyond the fence line, a radio crackled to life for less than a second. Then silence returned. The faint burst of radio static disappeared as quickly as it came, swallowed by the storm rolling across Black Ridge Ranch. Nobody spoke. Rain tapped against the porch roof in uneven rhythms while the horses shifted restlessly inside the barn. Wade Mercer slowly turned his head toward the darkness beyond the fence line, eyes narrowing. Who else is out here? He demanded. Naomi Carter did not answer right away. She stood motionless beneath the yellow porch light, while cold wind pushed strands of rain sideways across the yard. The old ranch. House creaked softly behind her. Somewhere inside, a clock ticked steady and slow. Wade stepped closer. I asked you a question. Naomi finally looked at him again. You came onto private land in the middle of the night, she said calmly. And now you are hearing things that should make you leave. Sounds simple enough to me. Trevor backed away from the boot prints near the barn, flashlight shaking harder now. These are fresh, he called out. Somebody walked patrol routes around this place. One of the other men laughed nervously. Patrol routes? What is this, some military movie? But nobody fully relaxed. Not after the radio. Not after the footprints. Wade climbed down from the porch and grabbed the flashlight from Trevor's hand. He swept the beam across the mud himself. Deep impressions. Heavy boots. Perfect spacing. Whoever made them had moved carefully through the rain, without leaving confusion behind. Wade's expression tightened. Probably some old ranch hand, he muttered. Naomi folded her arms slowly across her chest. There have not been ranch hands here in years. The youngest member of the group looked toward the trucks again. Wade, maybe we should come back during daylight. Wade snapped around immediately. And look weak. The boy lowered his eyes. No, sir. Naomi watched the exchange quietly. The porch light reflected faintly across her dark eyes, unreadable and still. Then another sound drifted through the rain. A horse breathing hard, followed by the soft creak of a stall door moving on its hinges. Every flashlight swung toward the barn at once. Trevor swallowed hard. I thought you said nobody else lived here. Naomi's gaze stayed fixed on the barn doors. Nobody does. Lightning flashed across the sky, turning the ranch silver for one brief second. In that instant, the men saw movement near the side of the barn. Tall, human, gone before the thunder followed. The youngest man stumbled backward. You saw that, right? Nobody answered him. Even Wade stayed silent now. The live stream phone remained pointed toward the darkness, comments racing too fast to read. Some viewers claimed it was fake. Others begged them to leave. One comment repeated, over and over again, get out now. Naomi stepped down from the porch at last. Slow, controlled. Her boots pressed into the mud without hesitation. The men instinctively shifted out of her way, though none of them seemed to realize they were doing it. Wade noticed. His jaw tightened again. You think this is funny? He asked her quietly. Naomi stopped halfway between the house and the trucks. Rain soaked through her denim jacket, but she did not react to the cold. No, she answered. Funny would have been you turning around an hour ago. Wade lifted the flashlight toward her face. For the first time, the beam revealed the faint pale line of an old scar running along the side of her neck before disappearing beneath her collar. Not fresh. Old. Clean. Precise. Military. Wade's eyes narrowed. Where did you get that? Naomi glanced at him without emotion. Far from Texas. Another gust of wind rolled across the ranch. This time it carried a new sound with it. The low hum of a generator shutting down somewhere behind the barn. Instantly, both pickup headlights flickered once and died. Darkness swallowed the ranch whole. Darkness swallowed the ranch so completely that for one strange second nobody breathed. The live stream phone captured nothing except rain streaking across black static, while confused voices filled the microphone. What happened? Did the power just die? Wade. The men turned in circles, flashlights cutting nervous beams through the storm. Mud sucked at their boots. Horses shifted violently inside the barn now, their nervous movements echoing through the wood like distant drums. Wade Mercer grabbed the nearest man by the shoulder. Check the trucks. 2 flashlights immediately bounced toward the gate. Naomi Carter remained exactly where she stood in the yard, barely visible now except when lightning flashed overhead. Rain rolled off the brim of her cap in slow streams. Calm, silent, untouched by the panic spreading around her. One truck door slammed open. Then another. Battery is dead, somebody shouted. Both of them. Wade barked back. How? The answer came a few seconds later. The cables are gone. A long silence followed. Even the live stream. Comments seemed slower now, as if thousands of strangers watching through their phones suddenly felt the shift happening on Black Ridge Ranch. Wade looked toward Naomi again. You think this is some kind of game? Naomi tilted her head slightly. No, she answered softly. Games are supposed to be fair. Thunder rolled low across the Texas sky. Trevor moved closer to Wade now, flashlight trembling against the rain. We should leave on foot. Wade snapped around. 6 miles in this weather? Better than staying here. Wade stared at him with disbelief. You are scared of one woman? Trevor looked toward Naomi, standing alone in the yard. I do not think we are alone anymore. Nobody argued with him this time. Another gust of wind swept across the property, carrying the smell of wet hay, diesel fuel, and cold metal. Then came the sound again. A radio crackle. Closer now. North fence secure. A calm voice whispered through static. Every flashlight whipped toward the darkness instantly. Who said that? One of the men shouted. No answer came back. Wade's breathing grew heavier. Naomi slowly began walking through the mud toward the barn. Not fast, not threatening, just deliberate. The men watched her every step like prey trying to understand a predator that had not decided whether to strike. The youngest gang member raised the phone toward her again. Lady, he called nervously. Who else is out here? Naomi stopped walking but did not turn around. Ghosts, she said quietly. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the ranch in sharp white light. For half a heartbeat, they saw something hanging beside the barn doors. Metal tags tied together with black cord. Military dog tags. The light vanished before anyone could read the names stamped into them. Trevor whispered a curse beneath his breath. Wade? I know that stuff. Wade kept staring at Naomi's back. What stuff? Trevor swallowed hard. Patrol routes. Radio discipline. Vehicle disablement. Rainwater ran down his face while realization slowly settled into his expression. Somebody trained did this. The youngest man lowered the phone again. Military. Trevor nodded once without taking his eyes off Naomi. Wait. Forced out a laugh, but it sounded thin now. So what? She served somewhere 20 years ago. Naomi finally turned halfway toward them. You boys ever hear the quiet before a tornado hits? Nobody answered. Feels peaceful at first, she continued softly. Then you realize the world stopped making noise because something dangerous is getting close. The barn doors creaked open behind her without warning. Several men jumped backward immediately. Inside the barn, dim emergency lights flickered weak red against the stalls, painting long shadows across the walls. Horses breathed heavily inside the crimson glow, and hanging above the central workbench was an old framed photograph. A younger Naomi in desert camouflage standing beside a military convoy beneath a burning orange sky. One of the men stepped closer and squinted through the rain. United States Marines, he whispered. Wade stared at the picture, then at Naomi, then back at the picture again. For the first time all night, his confidence cracked completely. Rain poured harder across the ranch as the weak red emergency lights inside the barn flickered against old wooden beams and rusted tools. Nobody moved toward the photograph. Nobody laughed anymore either. Wade Mercer stared at the younger version of Naomi Carter frozen behind the dusty glass frame. Desert camouflage, sand-colored tactical vest, dark sunglasses beneath brutal Middle Eastern sunlight. Behind her stood armored military vehicles coated in dirt and smoke. But it was not the uniform that unsettled him most. It was her expression, calm, focused, the same exact look she wore tonight. Trevor stepped closer beneath the barn awning, flashlight trembling against the floorboards. That is Force Recon, he whispered. Wade glanced sharply toward him. How do you know that? Trevor swallowed. My older brother served. The air inside the barn suddenly felt colder despite the humid storm pressing against the roof. One of the horses shifted heavily inside its stall, leather straps creaking softly in the crimson light. Naomi walked slowly past the men without acknowledging their stares. Her boots echoed against the damp barn floor. Steady, measured, controlled. She reached a small metal cabinet mounted beside the workbench and opened it calmly. Inside sat old radios, neatly folded maps, batteries, flashlights, and rows of labeled supply tins stacked with almost military precision. Wade noticed immediately. Nothing in the barn looked random. Everything had a place. Everything looked maintained. Prepared. What exactly are you planning here? He demanded. Naomi closed the cabinet gently. Surviving, she answered. The youngest gang member looked around nervously. Wade, this is crazy. We should go. Go where? Trevor snapped quietly. The trucks are dead. Another thunderclap rolled overhead. Then came a new sound. A distant engine somewhere far beyond the fields. Every head turned toward the storm outside. Faint headlights appeared briefly through the rain near the north fence line before disappearing behind rows of trees. Who is that? One of the men whispered. Naomi said nothing. Wade stepped closer toward her now, trying to force confidence back into his posture. You called somebody? Naomi leaned one hand against the old workbench. No. Then who is driving around your ranch at 1 a.m? Naomi looked toward the storm beyond the barn doors. Probably somebody who heard trouble. The answer unsettled them even more because she sounded sincere. Trevor's flashlight drifted lower across the workbench. His breathing caught immediately. Wade, he said quietly. Look at this. Scattered across the table were old newspaper clippings beneath a layer of dust. One headline partially visible beneath the flashlight beam read, Local Marine honored after Fallujah rescue. Another clipping showed Naomi years younger shaking hands with a decorated general. Beside the articles rested a folded American flag sealed inside a glass case. The youngest man took an uneasy step backward. Why would somebody like her stay out here alone? Naomi answered before anyone else could. Because crowds get loud after war. Silence swallowed the barn again. Rain hammered against the metal roof overhead, while emergency lights flickered across her face in pulses of dull red. Wade tried to hold on to his anger, but uncertainty kept leaking through the cracks now. He glanced toward the dark ranch house in the distance. You could have told us who you were. Naomi's eyes settled on him calmly. Would it have changed why you came here? Wade opened his mouth, then stopped. The answer sat too heavy between them. One of the horses suddenly stomped hard inside its stall. Then another followed. The animals sensed something before the humans did. Naomi noticed instantly. Her posture changed almost invisibly. Subtle, alert, predatory. Trevor saw it and turned pale. What is wrong now? He whispered. Naomi looked toward the open barn doors where darkness rolled across the ranch like black ocean waves beneath the storm. You boys stayed too long, she said softly. Then somewhere outside in the rain, a sharp whistle echoed once through the night. The whistle echoed across the ranch one long time before fading into the rain. Every man inside the barn froze. Even the horses stopped moving for a second, their heavy breathing filling the silence beneath the metal roof. Wade Mercer slowly turned toward the darkness outside. Who the hell is out there? He shouted. No answer came back. Only thunder rolling low over the Texas plains. Naomi Carter stood near the workbench with her eyes fixed beyond the open barn doors. Come again. Focused. Like she recognized the whistle and did not fear it. Trevor noticed immediately. You know that signal, he said quietly. Naomi did not deny it. It means somebody crossed a line. The youngest gang member stepped backward so quickly he nearly slipped on the wet barn floor. Wade, we need to leave right now. Wade grabbed him roughly by the jacket sleeve. And walk into what? Another whistle cut through the storm. Closer this time. Different direction. Not from the north fence anymore. From somewhere behind the ranch house. The men turned sharply toward the sound, while rainwater blew sideways through the open barn entrance. Naomi reached toward the old radio, sitting on the shelf beside her. Click. Static filled the room for a second. Then a voice spoke calmly through interference. South perimeter secured. Wade stared at the radio like it had become something alive. Who was that? Naomi lowered the volume slightly. An old friend. You called armed people here? Wade demanded. Naomi looked at him evenly. No, I called nobody. Trevor's face slowly lost color. They came on their own. Nobody liked the sound of that. Outside, wind pushed through the fields hard enough to bend the tall grass flat beneath the storm. One of the emergency lights flickered again, throwing jagged red shadows across the walls. The livestream phone still recorded everything, though the comments had changed completely now. Call the police. This is not a prank. Get out of there. One comment repeated again and again from different usernames. She is not trapped with you. You are trapped with her. The youngest man noticed it and swallowed hard. Wade. Wade snatched the phone from his hand and shut the live stream off completely. The sudden silence felt worse. No more voices. No more audience. Just rain, horses, and the strange radio breathing static into the barn every few seconds. Naomi moved toward one of the stalls and rested a gentle hand against the neck of a nervous chestnut horse. The animal calmed almost instantly beneath her touch. Wade watched the moment carefully. You really live out here alone? Naomi brushed rainwater from the horse's mane. Most days. That is insane. Naomi gave the faintest shrug. People are louder than storms. Another engine sound drifted faintly across the property. Not close enough to see, just distant enough to feel unsettling. Trevor moved beside Wade now, speaking low enough that Naomi could barely hear. I looked her up once, he whispered. Wade frowned. What? A few years ago, after my brother talked about force recon units. Trevor glanced nervously toward Naomi. There was a woman from Texas, decorated Marine, multiple combat tours, went missing after Afghanistan. Wade stared at him. Missing? Trevor nodded slowly. Nobody knew where she went after discharge. Naomi spoke without turning around. I bought horses. The men jumped slightly at the sound of her voice cutting through the tension. She continued stroking the horse calmly. Fixed fences. Buried a few ghosts. Another crackle burst through the radio. This time the voice sounded sharper. Movement near East Field. Instantly Naomi's expression changed again. Tiny shift. Barely visible. But Trevor saw it. Alertness. Calculation. Years of training waking up beneath still water. Wade noticed it too. What now? He asked quietly. Naomi finally stepped away from the horse and looked toward the darkness outside the barn. Rain hammered against the roof as lightning flashed over the distant fields. For half a second, silhouettes moved far beyond the fence line. Human figures, 3 of them at least, standing completely still in the storm. Then darkness swallowed them again. Naomi's voice dropped lower than before. Now your friends showed up. The silhouettes beyond the east fence vanished the moment lightning disappeared, leaving only rain and darkness swallowing the fields again. Nobody inside the barn spoke. Wade Mercer stared into the storm as though forcing his eyes hard enough might reveal what was watching them. Trevor stepped backward until his shoulders nearly touched the stall behind him. "How many people live around here?" he whispered. Naomi Carter looked toward the distant fence line without blinking. Close enough to hear trouble, far enough to mind their business. Another burst of static crackled through the radio beside the workbench. "Visual confirmed," the voice said calmly. 3 vehicles near County Road. Wade snapped toward Naomi immediately. "You have scouts." Naomi's eyes shifted toward him slowly. "I have neighbors." The answer somehow unsettled him more than if she had admitted to something illegal. Because neighbors implied loyalty, history, trust built over years. Wade finally noticed what he had ignored earlier. Every fence post on the ranch looked repaired. Every tool organized. Every horse healthy despite the isolation. This was not the property of a helpless woman barely surviving. It was the property of somebody who understood preparation better than most people understood comfort. Rainwater dripped steadily from the brim of his jacket, while realization settled heavier inside him. The youngest gang member spoke first. "Wade, what if the sheriff comes?" Naomi answered before Wade could. "Sheriff Donna Hayes is 2 counties over tonight. Highway accident near Midland." Trevor's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" Naomi walked toward the radio and lowered the volume again. "People talk on emergency channels when they think nobody is listening." Wade stared at her in disbelief. "You monitor police frequencies?" Naomi gave a slight shrug. "Storm season teaches useful habits." Another low engine sound rolled somewhere beyond the property. Closer now. Headlights flickered briefly between trees far out near the county road before disappearing again. The youngest man grabbed Wade's arm. "We need to leave on foot." Wade jerked away angrily, though fear finally leaked openly into his voice. "And walk where?" "Through ranch land we do not know, while random people circle us in the dark." Nobody answered him because the truth sat too obvious between them now. Naomi stepped beside the old workbench and picked up a folded canvas cloth. Carefully, she pulled it back, revealing an old combat knife resting beside weathered military patches and faded photographs. She did not touch the knife. She only looked at the photographs for a moment. Men and women in desert uniforms smiling beneath brutal sunlight. Dust-covered trucks. Sandstorms. Young faces that looked too tired for their age. Trevor stared at one photo longer than the others. "That is Kandahar," he whispered. Naomi folded the cloth back over everything gently. "Long time ago. My brother served there." Naomi nodded once. "Most people came home different." The barn fell silent again except for rain tapping against the roof and horses shifting softly in their stalls. Wade studied her carefully now. The scars. The discipline. The way she tracked every sound without turning her head fully. He finally understood something uncomfortable. Naomi had not been trying to scare them earlier. She had genuinely been warning them. A loud metallic bang suddenly echoed from somewhere outside, near the fuel shed. Every man jumped violently. One flashlight dropped into the mud with a splash. The horses reared nervously inside their stalls. Wade grabbed for the crowbar hanging from his belt while Trevor aimed his shaking flashlight toward the darkness outside the barn. "Who is out there?" Wade shouted again. This time a voice answered from beyond the rain. "Calm. Male. Older. People who told you to leave 3 chances ago." The men froze instantly. Naomi closed her eyes briefly at the sound of the voice, almost like exhaustion passing through her instead of relief. Trevor looked at her in disbelief. "How many people are on this ranch?" Naomi opened her eyes again slowly. "Enough." Then lightning flashed across Black Ridge Ranch once more, and standing beyond the fuel shed near the fence line were 3 older men in dark raincoats and cowboy hats, completely motionless in the storm. Lightning faded again, but the image of the 3 men standing beyond the fuel shed stayed burned into everyone's mind. They had not moved during the flash. Not 1 inch. Rain poured down their long coats while cowboy hats shadowed their faces completely. Wade Mercer tightened his grip on the crowbar. Who are they? Naomi Carter remained near the workbench, arms relaxed at her sides. Neighbors, she answered quietly. The older voice from outside carried through the storm again. Naomi, you all right in there? She nodded once, even though the men outside could barely see her through the rain. Still breathing, Frank. The oldest silhouette shifted slightly near the fence line. Good. Trevor stared at Naomi in disbelief. You have armed ranchers patrolling your land in the middle of the night. Naomi glanced toward him. You think Texans ignore trouble after midnight? Nobody had a response for that. The youngest gang member looked close to panic now. Water dripped from his hood while he stared toward the figures outside. Wade, I am done. I swear I am done. Wade ignored him completely. His eyes stayed locked on Naomi instead. You planned all this. Naomi shook her head once. You planned this. I just stayed home. The words landed heavier than the thunder outside. Wade slowly realized something humiliating. Nobody had trapped him. Nobody had hunted him down. He had driven himself and his crew into a place where they no longer controlled anything. The old radio crackled again. County deputy. Finally returning calls. The voice reported calmly. Road conditions bad. 40 minutes out. Trevor looked ready to collapse from relief. 40 minutes? Good. We can wait. But Naomi's expression darkened slightly for the first time all night. She looked toward the storm outside with sudden focus. No, she said quietly. You do not want to stay 40 more minutes. Wade frowned immediately. Why? Naomi did not answer right away. Instead, she walked toward the open barn doors and stared into the rain sweeping across the fields. The emergency lights painted her silhouette dark red against the storm. Then another engine sound rolled across the ranch. Louder this time. Faster. Not approaching carefully like before. This one came hard down the county road. Frank's voice shouted instantly from outside. More vehicles incoming. The atmosphere inside the barn changed immediately. Even Wade straightened at the sound. Headlights suddenly burst through the rain near the far fence line. One truck, then another behind it. Bigger engines. Louder tires cutting through mud. Trevor's face drained pale. Wade already knew. Cole, he muttered under his breath. Naomi looked back toward him sharply. Your brother? Wade nodded slowly. He was supposed to stay in town. The trucks roared closer through the storm until bright beams swept across the ranch house windows. Loud music pulsed faintly through the rain before engines cut off near the gate. Car doors slammed. More voices. Younger. Drunker. Meaner. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, almost disappointed. How many? She asked. Wade hesitated. Maybe 8 more. Frank cursed softly outside near the fence line. Damn fools. The younger gang member stepped backward again. You did not tell us your brother was coming. Wade looked genuinely unsettled now. I did not call him. Naomi stared toward the new arrivals gathering near the dead trucks by the gate. Then somebody watching your live stream did. Silence swallowed the barn again as realization hit all of them at once. The live stream had not only exposed the ranch. It had invited more predators to it. New laughter echoed across the property now. Cruel. Reckless. Unaware. One voice shouted through the rain. Where's the Black Witch at? Naomi's face became completely unreadable. The storm reflected in her dark eyes while distant lightning rolled behind the ranch house. Trevor noticed something then that terrified him more than the new arrivals. Naomi was no longer trying to avoid conflict. She was calculating it. The new arrivals spilled across the ranch entrance with loud boots, bright flashlights, and the careless confidence of men who believed numbers made them untouchable. Truck doors slammed through the storm while country rock blasted briefly from an open cab before somebody killed the engine. Rain hammered against metal and mud as younger voices echoed across the property. Wade, one man shouted. You seriously started without us? Naomi Carter remained near the barn doors, motionless beneath the red emergency lights. Her expression gave nothing away now. No anger. No fear. Just calculation. Wade Mercer stepped out into the rain immediately. Cole, get back in the truck. His younger brother laughed as he climbed over the dead pickup near the gate. Cole Mercer looked barely 30, broad-shouldered with a shaved head and the kind of grin people wore when they had never been told no often enough. Relax, he shouted. We saw the live stream. Several younger men behind him laughed loudly. One carried a chain. Another swung a flashlight carelessly toward the ranch house windows. "This the place?" somebody asked. "Looks haunted." Frank's silhouette remained near the fence line beside the other ranchers, barely visible through sheets of rain. None of them moved closer. They simply watched, waiting. Cole noticed them finally and squinted through the darkness. "Who are those old men?" Wade lowered his voice sharply. "You need to leave. Right now." Cole stared at his brother in confusion before bursting into laughter. "You serious?" He looked toward Naomi standing near the barn entrance. "This about her?" Naomi's eyes settled on him for the first time. Cole felt it immediately, even if he did not understand why. Her stare was not emotional. It felt measured, like she was memorizing details instead of reacting to insults. Cole spread his arms mockingly toward the ranch. "What? She got you scared?" Trevor stepped beside Wade, rainwater running down his face. Cole listened to him, but Cole barely acknowledged either of them now. His attention stayed fixed on Naomi. "You know what your problem is?" he called toward her. "You people always think land makes you important." The barn fell completely silent behind her. Even the horses stopped shifting. Naomi took one slow step forward into the rain. "And men like you think noise makes you powerful." Cole grinned wider. "I like her." One of the younger men behind him kicked an old fence post loose near the driveway, laughing when it collapsed into the mud. Another flashed his light toward the barn windows. "Military museum in there or something?" Wade suddenly grabbed his brother's shoulder hard enough to stop him. "Enough." Cole frowned immediately. "What is wrong with you?" Wade glanced toward Naomi before lowering his voice further. "You do not understand who this woman is." Cole scoffed loudly. "She is one woman on a ranch." Naomi answered calmly from across the yard. "That is where your math failed." Lightning flashed again over Black Ridge Ranch, illuminating the soaked fields for one brutal second. This time, everyone saw more silhouettes standing along the distant fence line. Not 3 anymore. At least 7. Older ranchers in long coats and hats spread across the perimeter without speaking, watching quietly through the storm. Cole's grin faded slightly. "Why are they just standing there?" Frank's voice drifted across the rain. "Because we already buried enough sons." Nobody moved after that. The words landed too heavy, too real. Even the younger gang members shifted uneasily now. Naomi looked toward the ranchers at the fence line with something almost like sadness crossing her face. Then the old radio inside the barn crackled sharply again. "Movement south side," the calm voice warned. Naomi's posture changed instantly. Alert. Focused. She looked toward the far side of the ranch house, where darkness swallowed the back pasture completely. "Eli," she whispered under her breath. Trevor heard her. "Who is Eli?" Naomi did not answer. Because at that exact moment, somewhere behind the ranch house, a single frightened scream cut through the storm. The scream came again from behind the ranch house, thin and terrified beneath the storm. Naomi Carter moved before anyone else fully understood what they had heard. 1 second, she stood near the barn doors. The next, she was already crossing the mud at a pace that felt unnaturally controlled, boots cutting straight through rainwater without hesitation. "Eli," she shouted. For the first time all night, emotion cracked through her voice. Wade Mercer turned sharply toward the back pasture, while Cole frowned in confusion. "Who the hell is Eli?" Trevor answered quietly. "Somebody she cares about." The realization changed the atmosphere instantly. The younger men near Cole exchanged nervous looks. They had spent hours provoking a woman who never reacted emotionally. Now suddenly she had. And somehow that felt worse. Another frightened yell echoed through the darkness near the ranch house porch. Naomi disappeared around the side of the building just as lightning flashed overhead. Wade cursed under his breath and followed several steps behind, though far more cautiously now. The others hesitated before trailing after them through the rain. Water splashed beneath their boots while wind slammed against the side of the house hard enough to rattle old windows. When they reached the back porch, the scene froze everyone in place. A skinny teenage boy stood cornered beside the generator shed, soaked completely through beneath the storm. Maybe 14 years old. Latino. Thin hoodie. Mud on his jeans. One of Cole's younger friends had grabbed him by the sleeve while laughing nervously. "Kid came out screaming when we walked around back," the man said defensively. Naomi stepped between them instantly. "Take your hand off him." Her voice dropped low enough that even thunder could not bury it. The younger man released Eli immediately without arguing. Not because Naomi raised her voice. Because every person standing there suddenly sensed the danger beneath her calm. Eli rushed toward Naomi without hesitation, clutching her jacket tightly. "Miss Carter," he whispered, shakily. "I heard trucks and thought they were stealing the horses." Naomi rested one hand gently against the back of his head. "You should have stayed inside. I tried calling you." Naomi glanced toward the dark ranch house windows. Phone lines were cut. Nobody admitted doing it. Cole looked between the boy and Naomi with growing disbelief. "You are protecting ranch kids now." Naomi slowly looked up at him. Rainwater streamed down her face beneath the porch light. "I protect people who do not deserve fear." Cole scoffed loudly, though less confidently than before. "You really think you scare me because you were some Marine 20 years ago?" Naomi did not answer. She only moved Eli quietly behind her. Frank and the older ranchers finally approached from the fence line now, walking steadily through the mud with hands visible and expressions grim. Old men, weathered faces, quiet eyes. None looked frightened. Cole noticed immediately. Why are all these people acting like this woman is dangerous? One of the ranchers answered before Naomi could. "Because we buried boys younger than you after they ignored warnings too." The storm rolled harder overhead. Wade rubbed rainwater from his beard while staring at Naomi protecting Eli behind her shoulder. Something about the image unsettled him deeply. Not because she looked violent. Because she looked responsible. Controlled. Like somebody carrying memories too heavy to risk losing another person under her watch. Eli peeked carefully around Naomi's shoulder toward the strangers. "Miss Carter," he whispered. "Are they the men from town?" Naomi nodded once. "Yes." Eli lowered his voice further. "The ones who burned Mr. Alvarez's barn last year." Silence crashed across the porch harder than thunder. Cole's expression changed instantly. He looked toward Wade. Wade looked away. Trevor stared at the ground. Naomi's eyes never left Cole's face. "Now you understand why I stayed awake tonight," she said softly. Somewhere near the driveway, another truck engine suddenly roared to life by itself. The sudden roar of the truck engine shattered the silence across the ranch. Every head snapped toward the driveway where one of the dead pickups now idled beneath the rain, headlights flickering weakly through the storm. Nobody had touched it. Nobody stood inside it either. The engine simply growled alive on its own like something waking from sleep. Eli tightened his grip on Naomi Carter's jacket immediately. "Miss Carter," Naomi gently moved the boy behind her again without taking her eyes off the truck. "Stay near the porch." Wade Mercer stared toward the driveway in disbelief. That truck was dead. Frank stepped closer through the mud with the other ranchers beside him. "No," he said quietly. "It was disabled." Cole looked sharply toward Naomi. "You did that." Naomi finally answered him directly. "You brought men onto my land who burned barns and threatened families." Rain rolled down her face while porch light reflected faintly across her dark eyes. "What exactly did you expect me to do?" Cole opened his mouth to answer, but stopped himself. Because for the first time all night, he realized he did not actually have a good reason for being there. The storm pressed heavier across the ranch now, wind rattling old porch boards and bending trees near the fence line. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low enough to vibrate through the ground. Trevor stepped beside Wade carefully. "She is right." Wade looked at him sharply. Trevor shook his head slowly. "This never should have happened." Cole scoffed immediately. "You scared too now?" Trevor glanced toward Naomi, standing protectively in front of Eli. "No, I am ashamed." The words hit harder than anybody expected. Even Frank looked toward Trevor with surprise. Wade rubbed a hand across his soaked beard and looked down at the mud beneath his boots. Exhaustion finally settled across his face. "We just wanted the land," he muttered quietly. Naomi answered him without anger. "Land does not belong to people who spread fear across it." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the ranch for one brutal second. The older ranchers stood quietly around the perimeter while younger gang members shifted nervously near the gate. Nobody looked powerful anymore. Nobody looked in control. Just wet men standing in mud beside a frightened boy and a woman who refused to break. Eli slowly peeked around Naomi's shoulder again. "Miss Carter?" "Yeah." "Are they leaving?" Naomi looked toward Wade instead of answering. Wade stared at the ranch house windows glowing faint yellow against the storm. Then toward the barn with its old marine photographs and emergency radios. then finally toward the fence line where local ranchers had shown up without being asked, simply because somebody needed protecting. Something inside him cracked quietly. "Cole," he said. His younger brother frowned. "What? Get everybody back to the trucks." Cole laughed once in disbelief. "You serious?" Wade looked at him fully now. "Look around." Rainwater dripped from his beard while thunder rolled behind him. "This woman stayed awake tonight because she knew men like us would come." Cole's confidence faltered for the first time. "So what? We just walk away?" Naomi spoke softly from the porch. "That depends on what kind of men you choose to be when the sun comes up." Silence settled over the ranch again. Cole looked toward the frightened faces around him. The soaked younger men. Trevor standing ashamed in the mud. The old ranchers watching quietly from the fence line. Then finally toward Eli hiding behind Naomi like she was the safest place on earth. Something shifted in his expression then. Small. Uncomfortable. Human. Another radio crackled somewhere near the barn. "County deputy entering East Road," the calm voice reported. Frank tipped his hat slightly toward Naomi. "Looks like this night is ending after all." Naomi nodded once, but did not relax yet. She watched Wade carefully while rain poured around them. Wade finally exhaled long and heavy before dropping the crowbar into the mud at his feet. The sound disappeared beneath the storm almost immediately, but somehow everybody heard it. The crowbar disappeared into the mud beneath the rain, and for the first time that night, Black Ridge Ranch grew quiet without fear hiding inside the silence. Nobody moved immediately after Wade Mercer let go of the weapon. Even the storm seemed to soften around the porch light, glowing against the darkness. Eli slowly loosened his grip on Naomi Carter's jacket, though. He still stayed close beside her. The boy looked exhausted now, soaked hoodie clinging to his thin shoulders while mud streaked across his jeans. Naomi glanced down at him gently. "You cold?" Eli nodded once. Naomi removed her denim jacket without hesitation and draped it over his shoulders. The simple movement changed something in the air. Cole Mercer noticed it first. Not the jacket itself, the instinct behind it. Naomi had spent the entire night warning, protecting, preparing, and restraining herself while every man standing in the mud had arrived looking for intimidation. The contrast suddenly looked ugly beneath the porch light. Distant red and blue flashes finally appeared through the rain near the county road. Sheriff lights. Slow. Still several minutes away. Frank tipped his hat lower against the storm and looked toward Wade. "Best decision you made all night, son." Wade gave a tired nod, but said nothing. He looked older now somehow. Smaller too. Like the storm had washed something false off him. One of the younger gang members quietly climbed back into the truck nearest the gate without speaking. Another followed. No shouting. No swagger left. Just tired men avoiding eye contact. Cole remained standing in the yard longer than the others. Rainwater rolled down his shaved head while he stared toward Naomi. "You really could have hurt us tonight, could you not?" Naomi looked at him steadily. "That was never the goal." "Then what was?" She glanced toward Eli standing beside her in the oversized jacket, making sure he still believed grown men could walk away from bad choices. The words hit harder than any threat could have. Cole lowered his eyes briefly. Trevor slowly approached Naomi through the mud while the others returned toward the trucks. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, "about Mr. Alvarez's barn. I never touched it." Naomi studied him carefully for a moment before nodding once. "I know." Trevor looked genuinely surprised. "How?" Naomi's expression softened slightly beneath the rain. "Men who enjoy cruelty do not look ashamed afterward." Trevor swallowed hard and glanced away. Another radio crackled softly from the barn behind them. "Deputies." Entering the property. Frank looked toward the approaching lights and sighed. "Good. I am too old to stand in rain another hour." A few quiet chuckles passed between the older ranchers for the first time all night. The tension finally began to loosen around the property. Eli looked toward the men by the fence line with curiosity. "Miss Carter?" "Yeah." "Why did they come help you?" Naomi looked toward Frank and the others standing silently beneath their soaked cowboy hats. Men with weathered hands and old scars hidden beneath heavy coats. "Because somebody once helped them," she answered softly. The sheriff vehicles rolled through the broken gate moments later, headlights cutting long white beams across mud, trucks, and tired faces. Deputy Donna Hayes stepped out first, boots splashing into puddles as she took in the strange scene before her. armed ranchers standing calmly beside gang members who suddenly looked more embarrassed than dangerous. A frightened teenage boy wrapped in a woman's jacket. And Naomi Carter, standing in the center of it all, silent beneath the rain. Donna removed her hat slowly. "Naomi," she said carefully, "what happened here?" Naomi looked around the ranch one last time before answering. The barn lights glowing red through the storm. Horses calming inside their stalls. Crowbar buried in mud. Young men avoiding her eyes. Old neighbors standing guard without being asked. Then she looked back at the deputy. "A bad decision," she said quietly. "That stopped before becoming a tragedy." Donna studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly like somebody finally understanding a story the town had been whispering about for years. Behind them, dawn began creeping faint gray through the storm clouds at the edge of the Texas horizon. Morning arrived slowly over Black Ridge Ranch. The storm had passed sometime before sunrise, leaving the fields soaked silver beneath low drifting fog. Water dripped from fence posts. Horses moved quietly inside the barn again, calmer now, their breathing soft beneath the smell of wet hay and cedar wood. The ranch no longer felt hunted. It felt tired. Naomi Carter stood near the broken front gate with work gloves on, her hands and a hammer resting against one shoulder. Mud clung to the bottom of her boots while pale sunlight stretched across the hills behind her. The sheriff vehicles were gone. So were the trucks belonging to Wade Mercer and his crew. Only tire tracks remained carved deep into the wet earth like scars slowly fading after battle. Eli carried a small wooden toolbox beside her, struggling slightly beneath the weight. "You do not have to fix the fence today," he said quietly. Naomi glanced toward the bent gate hinge. "If you leave damage sitting too long, people start believing broken things are normal." Eli thought about that while setting the toolbox down near the fence. Somewhere farther down the property line, Frank and two of the older ranchers repaired another section of fencing in silence. No speeches, no dramatic praise, just neighbors helping neighbors beneath a clear Texas sky. That seemed to matter more. Naomi crouched beside the broken post and tightened a rusted bolt carefully with steady hands. Eli watched her for a moment before finally asking the question that had been sitting inside him all night. "Were you really one of those Marines from the pictures?" Naomi paused briefly. Wind moved softly through the tall grass behind them while sunlight warmed the side of the barn. "A long time ago," she answered. Eli kicked lightly at the mud near his shoes. "Did you ever get scared?" Naomi smiled faintly at that. Not a proud smile. Not a heroic one. Just honest. "Every time." Eli frowned. "Then how did you do all that stuff?" Naomi tightened the final bolt before standing again slowly. Her knees cracked slightly from old injuries and colder weather. "Being brave is not about enjoying fear," she said softly. "It is deciding somebody matters more than your fear does." Eli looked down at the oversized denim jacket still hanging around his shoulders. The same jacket Naomi had given him during the storm. He understood more than she realized. A dusty pickup truck rolled slowly toward the ranch gate then, tires crunching gravel softly. Naomi immediately recognized it. Wade Mercer stepped out alone this time. No gang, no shouting, no weapons hanging from his belt. Just a tired man beneath the morning light, holding something folded carefully in his hands. Frank and the older ranchers watched from farther down the fence line, but did not interfere. Wade stopped several feet away from Naomi. "Found this in one of the trucks," he said quietly. He handed her the old livestream phone. The screen was cracked from rain damage. Naomi accepted it without speaking. Wade rubbed a hand across the back of his neck awkwardly. "My brother and the others are leaving town for a while." Naomi nodded once. Wade looked around the ranch slowly. The repaired fences. The barn. Eli standing safely beside her. Then finally at Naomi herself. "I spent half my life thinking power meant making people afraid of you," he admitted quietly. But last night, he stopped there. Words failing him. Naomi saved him from finishing. "Fear burns fast," she said softly. "Respect takes longer." Wade lowered his eyes briefly before giving a small nod. Then he turned back toward his truck without another argument. Eli watched him drive away down the muddy county road until the dust finally disappeared into sunlight. The ranch grew quiet again after that. Just wind moving through grass. Horses breathing in the barn. Hammers tapping softly against fence posts in the distance. Naomi looked out across the wide Texas fields glowing gold beneath the rising morning sun. Eli glanced up at her one last time. Do you think they will come back? Naomi rested the hammer against her shoulder again and stared toward the horizon. No, she said calmly. Not because they are scared of me. Eli waited. Naomi's voice softened beneath the morning light. Because now they know this land is protected by people who still remember how to be human.